Alright, so this video here is going to demonstrate how to work with macros. So I have this program which I showed you in the last video, and what this program did is it did a couple things. Number one, it flashed the lights in front of the robot on and off 5 times, and then at the very end, if my digital input was on there, it went around the circle. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm actually just going to delete this one line. Okay, so that we're not going to have this move. So there's nothing in this program that has anything to do with moving the robot arm. Okay, but if I run the program, right, it's going to just flash. It's going to flash these lights back and forth, okay, but the program is not actually moving the robot in any way. So what I would like to do is tie this to the Tool 1 button on here as a macro. Now if we go to the select and we go to the properties of this, the details of this, we see that the subtype is none. Now if you hit choice, one of the subtypes is to declare this as a macro, but I'm going to leave that undefined as just a no subtype. But I'm going to go over to my configuration screen. Now notice here there's a manual function screen. This is where we can put macros. And if you see there right now, I only have one macro on this screen. But what I'm going to do here is I'll put it on this screen, and then later I'll tie it to that Tool 1 button on here. So to do that, we have to go to Menu, and we need to go to Setup, Type, Macro. This is where we configure the macro. So what you can see here is we can create some macros, and I'm going to, this one's called like Tool Channel 1. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say User Key. So I'm going to select User Key 1, which is the Tool 1 key. Now, it won't actually let me do that because somebody else has it defined here. So this one here is user key. I'm going to change that to nothing. All right, so I can come over here. In mine now, I'm going to tie it to user key 1. Double definition. So user key . Okay. All right. Now I'm getting an error. You see that error down at the bottom? Can't assign a motion program to the UK. Well, I already talked about that. This program is making the lights flash. It's not moving. There's no motion in this program, but it doesn't matter. What matters is if we go back to this program, what matters is under details, the group mask. All right, so even though this program is not actually moving the robot, the group mask here with a 1 is saying that it's allowed to move any axis in group 1. Whether it's doing it or not, it's allowed to. So what I need to do is make this group mask a star. All right, so I'm going to make this group mask a star. Now I'm going to go back. Remember that the type is still none, but now I've removed that. So I'm going to come back here to my macro screen under Setup, and I'm going to tie this to Tool 1. Oh, I'm sorry. I have to choose the choice. I've got to select my program. My program was AA Flash. I forgot to assign my program to it. All right, and so now I still would have gotten that message. I was getting it for this other program. But I'm going to tie this here to tool 1. So the tool 1 button here, I know you can't read that too much, right? But that's our tool 1 right by the number 9. So when I press this, you're going to see it automatically calls and starts executing my flashing lights. So I've got that tied to my flashing lights. All right, so now on the other hand, if I just wanted to call this, I'm going to come over here and label this. I'll use my keyboard here, and I'm going to just call this like flash. Flashing lights. Okay, so now I'm going to come over here and I'm going to go back to choice and I'm going to make this MF. Okay, so I'm going to make it MF. Let's see, this was NF1. I'm going to label that one 2, and this is going to be NF1. So this is now, if I go to my menu, manual functions, the first choice is flashing lights. And so if I now say execute that, so F3 to execute this, I guess I do shift execute, shift F3, you can see that my lights are flashing. All right, so so we can put macros on the manual. What gets me is when you look at this, it says manual functions here. But when you select it, it actually says manual macros. All right, but again, we can execute those there, or we can tie them to one of those 7 keys, tool 1, tool 2, these 7 keys that kind of do a backwards L along the numeric pad on your teach pennant. We can tie a macro there. When we do that, now notice here, if I go back to my select and look at my detail, notice that the subtype now is macro. See, the subtype there is now a macro. So even though I didn't select it, I could have selected it before by using the choice. But I left it intentionally as none just to show you that, you know, if you forget to mark it as a macro, when you assign it to one of the macro, when you assign it under the macro setup, so menu, setup, and then under setup, there is, of course, under 5 is macro. And the number may change sometimes depending on various software installed, so you always got to kind of read it. But the once you assign that under the macro configuration menu under setup, it'll change that type to a macro for you. All right, but that's how we can assign macros. We can assign macros to one of these 7 user-defined keys, or we can assign macros to the manual function screen, and we can order them whatever order we want them. All right, and so those are how you use macros. Okay, you can also call a macro. So like notice here I have this flashing lights. So I'm going to come over here to some other program that I have. So I'm just going to jump down here and grab some program. I know that I know like this circle program here goes around the circle. I know that this is actually a working program at the moment. So what I'm going to do here is in here I'm going to call my macro. So I'm going to run this program. This program here goes around the circle that we can't actually see the circle, but it makes a circle horizontally on the surface up there. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to instruction, and I'm going to come over to macro. So over here is macro, and then under macro, I'm going to find my flashing lights. There they are. Okay, I see it now. There's my flashing lights. So I'm going to select my flashing lights. So what this is going to do now, when I run this, it is going to run. It's going to go down. It's going to go around the circle. So it goes down and around the circle. It's going to return. And then it's going to, hey, I'm done. And it starts flashing the lights. Okay. So we can call a macro. Now, we could have also called the macro using a call. If I could have came over here and I could have done a call and called the program, which the program was AA flash. Okay, so where's AA flash? It's not showing up because notice the F2 key says macro. So now that it's been defined as a macro, it shows up under the macro list. So now if I run it, it's going to call, let me throw in a wait here also. Throw in a blank line. I'm just going to throw in a wait. And we're going to wait about 3 seconds. Wait 3 seconds. So the first time it's calling it using the macro assigned name under manual functions. The second time it's going to do an ordinary call as a teach pendant program. All right, because technically this is still a teach pendant program, and so you can call it or you can execute it like you normally would. So we can, you know, even though we've defined it as a macro, when I run this, so again, it's just going to go down and run around the circle. Return. Now it's called the flashing lights as a macro. Then it's going to return back to the main program, wait 3 seconds. Now it's going to call it as an ordinary teach pendant branching program. Okay, so, you know, it's still an ordinary teaching program. So we can also, remember, we can also just come over in our select screen and call it and run it because it's just an ordinary teach pendant program. All right, so the macros are ordinary teach pendant programs you can run normally or call normally, but we can also call them using the macro feature, and then we don't have to use the word call when we do that. The only problem is if you want to call it from, say, a select statement or if statement, then you must use the call because they don't give you an option for macro in those settings. All right, but there's some different ways that we can use macros.